Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's screening of Traces, Portraits of Resistance, Survival, and Resolve. My name is Sydney Yeager, and I'm the Public Programs Coordinator at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. Now in its 25th year, the museum is committed to the crucial mission of educating our diverse community about Jewish life and heritage before, during, and after the Holocaust. As part of that mission, our programs illuminate the stories of survivors, broader histories of hate and anti-Semitism, stories of resistance against injustice, and more. Thank you for joining us today virtually. We hope you will visit the museum in person to see our new core exhibition, The Holocaust, What Hate Can Do, alongside our temporary exhibitions, Boris Lurie, Nothing to Do But to Try, which is running through November 6th, and Survivors, Faces of Life After the Holocaust from photographer Martin Scholler, which actually opens today, September 18th. You can learn more and find tickets on our website. We appreciate the vital support of our members so much here at the museum. If you want to get closer to the museum and enjoy exclusive programs, member previews to exhibitions, and free admission, you can explore museum membership on our website or email membership@mjhnyc.org to learn more. Closed captions are available on today's program, and instructions on how to turn captions on or off will be posted in the chat, in addition to all the links I've mentioned. If you have questions for our speakers during the program, please put them in the Zoom Q&A box, and we will get to as many as we can at the end of the hour. And though I will be off camera during the films, I'll be here in the chat for any thoughts, questions, or needs. Today, we are honored to be joined by Judith Goldstein, Peter Hein, and David Hein. Dr. Judith S. Goldstein is the founder and executive director of Humanity in Action, Inc., and executive producer of the Traces trilogy. She holds a PhD in history from Columbia University, where she worked for 10 years, focused on an oral history project on ethnic groups and American foreign policy. Judith was also the executive director of Thanks to Scandinavia. In 1997, Judith founded Humanity in Action and has served as its executive director ever since. She serves on the board of the Francis Perkins Foundation and the Soames Pond Center and is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Peter Hein was an associate professor in obstetrics and gynecology until his retirement. Since then, he has been a guest speaker, writer, and sculptor. As a Jewish child, he was hidden in the Netherlands during World War II, as were his parents. He wrote the books The Sixth Year about his own hiding and The First Year After the Liberation and the Hiding on the dramatic hiding of his parents. David Hein is the head of the Defense Office of the Kosovo Specialist Chambers, an international court in The Hague tasked with adjudicating cases concerning international crimes committed in Kosovo before, during, and after the war there. Previously, he worked as legal officer at the War Crimes Chambers in Sarajevo. About this and about growing up in the shadow of his father Peter's trauma, he wrote the novel A War to Call My Own. And I now want to hand things over to Judith to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you, Sydney. I want to mention to start off with that these films are supported by two different entities. The Danish film, which you'll see first, is supported by the Danish Foreign Ministry and the Danish Embassy in Israel. And then the other two films, Two Trees in Jerusalem and My Father's War, are supported by the Alfred Landecker Foundation, which is in Berlin in Germany. We're grateful to all of these entities that have had confidence in these narratives and our capacity to bring them to the public, such as we're doing today.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to all three of you for joining us today, and congratulations on really beautiful films. They're so impactful. And Judith, I want to begin by asking you to give us some background on Humanity in Action. What is the mission of the organization, and what kind of work do you do outside of these films?
Well, the most important thing I can say about Humanity in Action is that David is a fellow and was in the program many years ago. So Humanity in Action is an educational program and devoted to supporting democracy, supporting pluralism, to integrating the history of the Second World War and the Holocaust into contemporary society and our understanding of the dynamics of democratic, pluralistic societies. We've been running the program for over 20 years. It is international. It is for university and college students to enter into the program. And we provide a whole series of educational resources in terms of fellowships, which are 1-month programs in international groups in 6 countries, including the United States and the Netherlands and Germany, Bosnia, Poland, and Germany. And just opportunities to create a strong network which has ongoing engagement in civic society.
That's awesome. And can you tell me why you decided to make these films and how you chose the stories that would be a part of the 3?
The Danish story came first due to the pictorial narrative that was commissioned many, many years ago, commissioned asking Judy Glickman-Lauder to do photographs of the places of the Danish rescue and the people involved. And one of the key people was Rabbi Bent Melchior. We continued to be close to him over the years. The photographs were then incorporated in a book called, I think, Shadows of the Holocaust. I may have the name wrong, forgive me. But in any case, we got the idea that it would be wonderful to put together this narrative in film form and in animation form so that it would be accessible to all generations. It was, I think, quite beautifully done with the rabbi, who unfortunately died over a year ago. And we felt then that we should continue this series of narratives. I had heard David and Peter talking to our Dutch program 2 years ago. They had a conversation about the intergenerational issues and the history. And it was so interesting that we thought, let's build upon the narratives that they had already written, David's books and Peter's books, and combine it into one story. And then Cornelia's story is based upon her own writing. She's a well-established writer, historian, and political figure. And it was an adaptation. We adapted her book, put it into this narrative. And so the 3 represent 3 aspects of the war. One is a country that resisted and protected its Jewish population in an extraordinary way and different from any other country in Western Europe. 2, the Dutch story of generational trauma and of betrayal and of having to go into hiding, the story of a Jewish family. And then the 3rd story, the German story of a non-Jewish family protecting Jews and endangering their own lives to do so, and the cost that it took for them to do that.
Well, thank you for bringing up Peter and David, because that is an excellent segue to my next question. So Peter and David, what was it like to be asked to put your story on film? And what form did that ask come in?
Well, Peter or David?
Yes, whoever wants to start.
Well, fathers first, perhaps.
Yes.
I think we have something which is important to tell, and how can one reach many people is by books or by film. So I think we did write books about it, and now came this film across, which I think it's important to bring into the attention of many people. what happened, and this way of this kind of film is very appropriate to get the message across, I think, better than when you do some interviews or things like that, you know. So this I think it's a good format to get the message across. That's my answer first.
Yeah, David. I was, of course, I was honored, so to say, by the by Judy's request. But as I said before to some other people, it's also a bit odd to see the story of your life being told as if it's a movie. And initially you have some, let's say, doubts whether the question is how interesting is my part in this, because of course I'm the son of my father and I'm not the one who, let's say, lived through the agonies of the Second World War. But when I realized that let's say, the theme of the movie, so to say, was the intergenerational conversation, and maybe not so much intergenerational trauma, but how does this resonate into second or maybe even third, hopefully not, but maybe even third generations, then I grew to like the idea of the movie. And as Peter says, I think this is a very easy, funnily enough, way of getting this message across. Indeed, there is a lot of drama in the story. The story is being told quite fast, but it does capture all the, let's say, life events Peter and the rest of the family went through in, let's say, 20 minutes. So I'm quite proud of the result, I have to say, and I'm glad that it resonates quite well, and that people abroad, in this case the US, New York, are also able to see it.
So I want to go a little bit into the process of creating the film. So Judy, I know you kind of talked a little bit about this before, but can you talk about the decision to go with animation and how you picked the animator, how you picked who would do the voiceovers and that kind of thing?
Yeah, and I had seen other animated films, particularly about contemporary political issues. And I thought that it was extremely interesting media. The executive producer, there are two of us who are the executive producers, a woman by the name of Irene Brahm, who works with the Bertelsmann Foundation, North America. And she had made a number of films with the animator. And it just seemed as that was the right way to go. So we were also extremely lucky because, or fortunate, that we had narratives to work off of. That is, in the case of the Danish story, Bent had given many talks about his experiences and had written an essay, which was included in the book, In the Shadows, or Beyond the Shadows, that Judy Glickman-Lauder put together. So there was a text. We went to Bent and said, would you essentially tell the story again? It was all there. Cornelia's book needed to weave together many different, in making the narrative, we needed to knit together many different aspects of her book. And her book, in fact, Two Trees in Jerusalem, which is a beautiful book, is very much a chronological narrative. But we felt in the film that it was important to connect past and present, to show the impact of her parents' values on her. And so you see in the film that we cut into her life as in government, and the important things that she did based upon the kind of person that her parents expected her to be. So there we did a lot of editing and piecing together from her book what the story would be. In terms of David and Peter, we said, would you put together a narrative for us? And that they did. And so what happens is you start with the narrative, you give it to the animator then puts drawings in place as you test what these persona are going to look like. And then you animate them and you put music to it. And then you have these 3 quite extraordinary films.
Well, Judy, providing another excellent segue for me. Peter and David, what was the process like on your end? And so what was it like to be a part of creating the story and doing the voiceover?
Well, in fact, it was a strange experience, you know, especially when we, for the first time, saw the not finished film. Well, it is a feeling as if the animation artist disengages yourself from the person you are. You don't recognize yourself, you don't recognize your parents, and it's like we always hear that the film is much better or worse than the book. You know, it's our complete different entities. So it took a while to get accustomed to the fact and that you saw something which was based on your story, but what you didn't recognize exactly in the characters you saw, because they are just invented by the animation artist. Mm-hmm. So it felt a little bit schizophrenic, you know, to feel and see 2 different things. But I must say, I am, and I know David also, we are very content with the results. I mean, it's a marvelous film. So, but well, deep inside, you don't feel connected to the story because you see something you don't feel. You understand what I mean?
If I can add something, or are you finished?
Yeah.
If I can
think
add,
so, but I am.
Sorry?
You wouldn't think so, but
oh,
I
exactly,
am.
exactly,
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
Well, but we've known each other, so we can fill in for each other. Now, what I wanted to say is, it's a bit odd, or not really odd, but as Peter was saying, can you still hear me? It seems like I'm locked.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, okay, good. Now, as Peter was saying, it is your story, and everything what is in there, of course, is true, because the factual things are very true. But of course, Peter told me all these stories, and I had ideas about it in my head. So I have a movie in my head of what happened to him during the war. And now this is the first time that this thing is actually been put into a movie, and it looks very different. So you had to come to terms with these 2 things. But I think that's also the power for me. The first time I saw it, for instance, when I saw it on a big screen, I was, and it's a bit embarrassing to say, but I was moved and touched by it. And it's a bit, how would you say that? It's a bit odd to be moved and touched by your own story, especially if you've heard it so many times. But I think that's a testament to the strength of the movie. But just a funny anecdote: Peter and I, we went together to the sound studio. So we had to do the voiceover. And of course, we wrote the story. We wrote the script, I think, or the scenario. I don't know what. Apparently, there's a technical difference, but I don't know exactly what it is. Anyway, then there was somebody who was a true professional. He rewrote that script into something which actually is more truly for a movie. Because I think the way we wrote it was more like somebody who's reading the news, without any emotion, etc., etc. And he added a lot of drama to it. And Peter and I had to. The Dutch are usually quite known to be, let's say, relatively sober, and I think so are we. So we had to get used to that, and we had to redo the reading of the movie quite often. And it was quite funny that there was a director who was instructing Peter on how to read his own emotions of 30 years, or sorry, 75 years ago, which was quite, let's say, surreal to have somebody tell him how he should get his feelings or talk about his feelings, or how he would have to pitch or raise his voice in order to get his personal feelings across. I thought that was an interesting experience.
Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But I think it came out very well. So, good job.
Thanks.
So but I'm wondering, I know you said it's very strange for you to kind of see your story on screen, but how has it been for the rest of your family? How have they reacted to seeing it?
Well, I think they felt exactly the same as we did. Of course, they know our stories and all the ins and outs, and then you see a man with a mustache who would be Peter Hein and isn't, and a lawyer in his costume who is wearing a costume he never wears in this. Well, I mean, not the same costume as was drawn. So there was also some humor in it for us, and for the family also, I think. David.
If I can add, because I saw a question also from the audience, somebody who asked, from what age can we I think the question was along the lines, what would be an appropriate age to watch this movie? I have a 7-year-old, and who, when she saw the movie, was 9. She just turned 10 this week. A daughter, who were both have seen the movie, and of course they knew the stories. Especially my 10-year-old was very moved by it. I think the 7-year-old was a little bit too young for it, but it's interesting how this, as I said before, how the movie resonates within all the generations of our family. My mother looks at it a very different way than my brother and sister and my wife does, and my nephews and nieces and my children look at it at a very different manner as well. It's interesting, like I said, we have a very particular family history, and that is on the one hand, it's a very private family history. On the other hand, this kind of movies does make us realize that it's also, let's say, relatively public, in the sense that there is some value to learn about our family history, and not because we are so interesting, or because we are so good, or we are so yada yada yada. It's more that what happened to a very ordinary family 70 years ago could happen to a very ordinary family now again. And what kind of response does that have on the generations after them? And I think that's where the power of the movie is, not so much in the fact that we amuse ourselves about the fact that Peter was wearing a mustache, or these kind of things. I think the power in and I know for sure that Peter agrees, because we discussed that. Why is this a powerful movie? Is because it tells the story of very ordinary people who went through unordinary things, made the best out of it afterwards, but still it had a lingering effect on the generations after. And I think that's the story of it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Peter, do you have
No,
more?
it's yes, no, I agree. Yes.
So Judy, what has the response and the reaction been to the film worldwide when you've been, when you showed it, other than here?
It's been, I think, very positively received. It's been in a number of festivals. It's won some awards. We're very pleased. I think the thing that is most interesting is the relevance of the stories to today. And that if you look at them, the questions of perpetrators, of collaborators, of bystanders, and of resistors is very compelling as we look back and as they appear in these family histories. But they, I think, challenge us to think about the kinds of situations we're in today, where some dangers to our democracies are very great. And we have to ask ourselves, what have we learned from the past? What do these stories mean to us? These stories of courage and Peter's father, his sense of, he knew what was happening and he knew what he had to do. But he was also dependent on people around him to protect him as much as they could. Sometimes they didn't, sometimes they didn't. So, and the whole question of intergenerational trauma and of how you absorb these histories, what it means, all of that, I think, is very, very critical to where we are today.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And so now that we've kind of talked about the process, I want to get a little bit into like the content of the films. So Peter, I was really struck by the fact that you and your parents were constantly moving around while you were in hiding. And this isn't really a narrative that I've at least seen on film and in other media about Jews in hiding during the war. So was it important to you that people see a different narrative of hiding and what that was like for you?
Yes, very much so, because in fact, the Dutch jury doesn't feel very comfortable with Anne Frank's story, because that's the story everybody knows. And I see now also in your case, the question you put me, as if it is extraordinary that Jewish people were hiding at different places. I think that was the majority of the hidden Jews. I don't know the exact figures, of course, but in my view, more people were hiding in one place and then in another place, because in fact, the Anne Frank story is a story of, in fact, a very lucky family. That sounds strange, but they were all together. They were very well hidden. They were well fed. They didn't suffer cold. They were together. Of course, visitor and fish remain 3 days fresh. So there are quarrels, etc., and irritations, but the hiding of the Frank family was in fact a very nice hiding. The drama is that they were betrayed, and that's another thing I want to stress, that there was a lot of betrayal in the Netherlands, and that was also the reason for my parents and also for me to go from one hiding place to another. My parents were in 12 different places, were 3 times betrayed, and just thanks to the courage and the intuition of my father, they managed to escape every time again. And in my case, also, I had to go from one place to another because it became dangerous at some places for different reasons. And in fact, you touch now a certain point. People think hiding was like the Anne Frank's family, but there were many different ways of hiding. I also know somebody who said, my hiding time was the nicest time of my life. I was with farmers in the north of the Netherlands as a child, and I was playing with the cows and the cattle, and I had a wonderful time. And when I came back to my traumatized parents, we never got along very well anymore. This hiding time was the best time of my life. So it's not one way of hiding, you know, but in most cases, I think people went from one place to another. And what I want to stress is what amazes me and what I can't understand is that people like to betray each other. Why should you betray? Of course, there were Jew chasers in the Netherlands who got 7.5 guilder pro Jew. So then you can understand that they betray you because they get money. But there were a lot of people who were just betraying their neighbors who were hiding Jews. It seems to be a human trait, which is, well, not very nice. I would make an understatement. There's a long answer to your short question, but I'm glad you put this question to me.
No, I thank you for your answer. I also want to ask, it seems from the film that no one really gave you an explanation of what was happening when you went into hiding and then when you were separated from your parents. But did anyone ever explain it to you? And if so, how did they do that?
No, they didn't, because it would be dangerous. I felt all the time that I was in danger, but I never knew what was really going on. I stopped to attach myself to people because I went from one place to another, but nobody explained to me. On the other hand, I was hiding from the age of 4 till 6.5 years old. So explain children of that age that people are trying to murder them is of course a little bit difficult. I was told, or no, I had to tell people that my parents were in the Dutch Indies, our colony, and that I was in the Netherlands as a relative of the families where I was hidden.
And you know, you speak a little bit about this emotional distance that you developed during the war. But were you ever able to sort of rebuild your relationship with your parents, or did you kind of keep that emotional distance?
No. Of course, the beginning was a little bit difficult because I didn't recognize my parents, but they were very warm and pleasant people. And within a few months, we were growing into each other's direction. And in fact, it was a kind of happy ending, although the liberation as such was not a happy ending. And in fact, it was a rather traumatical experience because everybody around was expecting a Hollywood ending, parents and child falling into each other's arms. And that was not true at all. That was not the case. I don't understand how it's possible that you in 2 years totally forget your parents and don't recognize them anymore. And I didn't want, in fact, when I went with them to their last hiding address, because they didn't have an own address immediately after the war, but I went there at their hiding place where they're not hiding anymore. But it felt for me as going into another hiding, you know, just new people who I didn't know and who were hiding me, although they were not hiding me. But I was severely wounded and I couldn't walk. And the Aunt Cor, the lady who was overall looking after me she had the contacts where I was, etc. And she moved with me to the house of the hiding of my parents. So that made also the change from one place to another a little bit easier for me. So they did this very intelligent, I think.
Yeah. So David, how early were you told about Peter's experiences during the war, and how was that explained to you?
From a very early age. I don't exactly know from what age, but the thing is, Peter would tell us bedtime stories, actually Sunday morning stories, when we would cuddle in bed with him on Sunday mornings, and we asked him to tell him exciting stories about his youth. And part of these stories were stories from after the war, but also stories from during the war, because Peter is an easy talker, and we were good listeners, and he told us all the stories. So we knew from a very young age what happened to him. But I think he did it relatively. He was taking our age into consideration when he was talking about these stories. On the other hand, we knew when we were 6, 7, 8 that he had been in mortal danger, basically, that he didn't know any safety when he was young, etc., etc. So, but we took that as just a fact of life. So we were quite young when we heard of it, but the way in which we heard it was, I think, suited for our age.
It's important to add that I realized, of course, that you shouldn't let your children suffer under your trauma. So the way I told it was not larmoyant and dramatic, but just factual and according to their age. And then I think, and I also asked my children, David, Ruben, and Eva, whether I can tell the stories also to their children, my grandchildren, not because I want to let go all my emotions, but I think there are many parents and grandparents who never talk about the war, and their children complain, I don't know anything. My parents didn't tell me anything. And I think it's a pity when my grandchildren are at the age of 30, 40, that they never heard of their own grandfather who could tell them in a proper way what happened during the war, that he shouldn't have done that. So it's on purpose that I talk about it, not because I want to get rid of my trauma or my grief or etc. But I think many people don't talk about their experiences, and all the children make verwijt.
Yeah, let me think. They're
well, they blame their parents.
Yeah.
That they blame their parents that they never told them anything, and that's a pity.
That's a thing we'll never do.
Okay, next question.
No,
David,
but sorry, just to add one thing, of
please.
course. I mean, I to some extent agree with Peter's assessment, that he always made sure that and that he now asks us whether we consider it appropriate if he tells the stories to our children. True, but let's say the filter that we are right now, we did not really have. Because Peter was the first, we were let's say the first generation to hear Peter's stories, and clearly it affected all 3 of the kids. Problem with these stories, they're never easy stories to tell, but they're never easy stories to hear as well. And no matter how much you as a parent want to protect your children from any trauma that you went through, I mean, that's clearly one of the things you do, no matter how well versed you are in telling your story and making it easy to the ear, you do transfer some of the, let's say, grief that you have in you.
Yeah,
That's the way it is.
yeah.
And it depends a little bit on how you handle it in the, let's say, after you told the story, both as a kid and as the person who told it, so the parent.
You said that these stories affected you and both of your siblings, but do you feel that these stories and your father's experience influenced your career path and, you know, going to Bosnia and now working at The Hague? Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be a liar if I would say it was not the case.
Mhm.
There are many, I mean, but you don't know of course, I don't know what, I had a keen interest in the war. I had a very keen interest in the Second World War and in the aftermath of it. Is it because of the stories Peter told me? Most likely. Am I sure? No. But of course, I was acutely aware of what, let's say, unlawfulness, etc., can do to people in civilized societies, for instance, like Bosnia was. I wanted to understand how people can get messed up after war, and what can you do to prevent that from happening, because I saw things in my own, let's say, direct surroundings. So I think that immediately led it go to Bosnia. I have to say, Humanity in Action channeled my interest in certain things a lot as well, because I was a little bit before I joined Humanity in Action, I was an okay student, but a little bit. This is literal translation from Dutch, out of control. And I know in American, out of control means something completely different than it would mean in Dutch. But in Dutch, it would mean undirected, without a certain sense of
Goal.
direction. I was a student without any sense of direction, and Humanity in Action channeled that a lot for me, and sort of gave me a more holistic view on both history, law, sociology, and that's, I think, both my, let's say, my family background and then my educational background through Humanity in Action channeled me into going into the direction where I eventually went to.
Mhm.
Does this answer your question?
Yes, yeah, thank you. So I know we're kind of getting towards the end of the hour and I want to make sure we have some time for some audience questions, but I do want to ask what each of you hope that people will take away from these films when they watch them. Whoever wants to start can go.
Well, may I start?
Yeah,
Yes.
please.
Age before beauty.
There are more expressions which I can't throw all over the world now, so I won't react to that. Well, there's always hope. That's one thing. Things can always get worse is another thing. As said in the film already, man is resilient, so you can endure a lot of ellende, misery, but it is possible to endure it. On the other hand, war never leaves you. I mean, it's in you. You try to live a normal life, but people sometimes say in your conversation at home, the war is not always far away. And it crosses through generations. But what still is for me a very important thing is that the whole Dutch population looked away. They were completely indifferent. One should stand up when one sees injustice, and that can be in the classroom when somebody is bullying another child, that can be in your office when the boss is bullying somebody, that can be in a train when there are problems. Stand up and do something, and don't be indifferent. Indifference is the worst thing I think there is. That's what I would like to answer to your question.
And I would like to say, I agree with Peter, and but two other things. Don't think it won't happen again. That's the first thing, because it will happen again. And don't think it won't happen to you, because it can happen to you. The thing is, in 1933, nobody in Germany or anywhere in the world thought it would end up like it was in 1945, because nobody could imagine that. And I don't say that nowadays we're in 1933, but everybody heard about the frog who was getting boiled. If a frog is in a cold pan and the heat
Temperature.
they heat the temperature up, it won't jump out. It will only jump out if it jumps into the hot pan. How is this comparison to now? We now hear and see all kind of things in society which we 15 years ago would not have expected. But we can't remember how it was 15 years ago because the volume has gone up and has gone to more radical things. And people seem to be in agreement with that. A lot of people who we found decent people are voting for parties which 10 years ago we thought would be extremely undecent. And that's really the word it is, undecent. Will this lead to a next Holocaust? Maybe that goes a little bit far, but will it go to in a direction where civilized people would not want things to go to? Yes, I think. And there we can learn from the past. That's what I think.
Judy, do you have anything to add?
No.
Okay.
They said it all.
All right. Well, then I want to move into, I think we have time for like 1 or 2 audience questions. So the first one is, Judy, are there any plans to make more films like this in the future from Humanity in Action?
We hope so.
Okay.
We're talking about it.
Okay. So stay tuned all.
Stay tuned.
And then, Peter, can you tell us a little bit more about at CORE and how she sort of became involved in looking after you during the war?
Yes, in fact, I just came by coincidence at my first hiding place because my parents didn't have a proper hiding place when we finally had to hide, and I was given to a young girl who was always walking me down the streets. She liked to walk with a little black-haired nice boy, and she handed me after 15 minutes over to her fiance, and I came and he brought me into his family, and his parents didn't like that very much, but okay, they took me. And then they had a friend that was out CORE, and she was not married, young woman, and she loved children very much. And well, she more or less took me as her child, but because of her profession, she could not keep me all the time, so several times she had to put me away. But she was just a nice lady who loved me very much and didn't want me let me go after the war also, but that's another story. So it was just by coincidence, all by coincidence.
Wow.
But pure, she was pure good. I mean, some people are pure evil, and she was just out of her goodness and her love for children, and she was not married, but she longed very much for children, so that was the reason she took me.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And then we also have a question, and I'm gonna broaden this out a little bit. Peter and David, are your books available in English? And Judy, maybe you can answer this for Cornelia's book as well.
Well, I would like to answer that very much, because we are looking for publishers who want to publish our books in English. The problem is that in the States, books that are translated from European countries are always only the bestsellers. It's very difficult from here to get your book published in the States or in England. So we are still looking, and if there is in the audience somebody who would like to contact us to help us to have the books published in the States, we would be very happy. But the answer is no.
And we can do it in a trilogy. We
Yeah.
could do it in a trilogy.
Yeah.
So the story of the grandparents, the story of the parent, and the story of the child.
Yeah.
There you go.
Cornelia's book is available in English. It's
Mhm.
published by Humanity in Action. Here it is, and it can be bought on Amazon.
Oh, nice.
There you go.
Very good.
It's a wonderful book.
Well, we are now at the top of the hour. Yes, there we go. Oh, we
Oh, wait,
have,
somebody's
contact
giving us a
Stephanie
tip.
Larkin. There you go. All right, so we have someone. Well, I want to thank all three of you so much for being with us today. This has been such an interesting conversation. Thank you for showing these beautiful films with us. And oh, please.
Yeah, no, can I, do you have time for, because I saw somebody from the audience ask one question
Sure.
about the trauma passed on from parent to child.
Mhm.
It's a lady who tells her mother was a Holocaust survivor as well,
Mhm.
and that she knew about her family's history intimately. And from what I understand, she says that the fear was a virus transmitted from parent to child. And how does one survive this trauma that was passed from parent to child? Of course, Peter and my story is a little bit about that as well. So I thought, let's give it one more minute of attention.
Mhm.
And why is my wife and I, as said already, we have young children, and my wife and I, we had quite lengthy conversations about the raising of our children. And one of the things that were discussed is, you have a very certain particular family history. The children should know about it, but they should not have any, let's say, additional unwanted historical luggage, emotional luggage because of this. And it is not so much a struggle, but it's difficult to make sure that my children know the story of Peter, that they know the story of me, basically, but that they can value it at the way they should value it at the age they have. And of course, I think, let's say, Peter's trauma for a while when we were young was quite raw. Now it's quite healed. My trauma was never really raw, but I did have luggage from my parents' past, my father's past. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that our children are aware of what happened to our family, that they learn the lessons we find valuable of it, but that the actual raw fear that comes with it is not instilled on them. But maybe in 20 years time from now, we can have the same conversation. And then we have my children here who wrote a book complaining about their father and grandfather and how they passed on trauma on trauma on trauma. But I think and I hope that we won't have that conversation.
But as you see, humor is a very important trait.
True, but it should fully agree. And then I'm going to stop. But that should not be a how do you say that? A tool to laugh everything away.
I know, but
Yeah, no, but yeah, we've had this conversation more privately before, so I know what you mean.
Well, thank you for taking the time to say that, and I very much appreciate you making those points. And thank you again to all three of you for joining us. Like I said before, this has been a really amazing conversation. I've learned so much. Thank you for showing the films. It's really been an amazing experience to get to view them.